Let's got a few things to cover this morning. We'll start with the fatal accident that happened Saturday night. This was just about 11:40 p.m. This was a two-car accident. We had two people in one car and four people in another car. We had one car that was driving east on Arrowhead Parkway, and we had another one that was on Highline Avenue and was waiting to make a turn, I believe, to head west. So at that intersection, there's controlled by lights, basically. So you've got your red lights and your green lights. There are some traffic cameras in that area, so that really helps to, establish exactly what happened. But the light turned green for the Chrysler Sebring, which was on Highline Avenue, and as that Sebring entered the intersection, the Subaru Impreza ran a red light and crashed into the side of the Chrysler, essentially a T-bone accident. We did have one witness that said they estimated the speed that the Subaru was driving was around 100 miles an hour. There was a tremendous impact that happened. We had two people that died in the Chrysler Sebring. There was basically everybody was taken to the hospital. So the 2006 black Subaru Impreza, there was a 23-year-old driver and a 23-year-old passenger, both men, both from Sioux Falls. The driver has life-threatening injuries. The passenger has non-life-threatening injuries. The driver, the 2007 silver Chrysler Sebring, the driver is a 17-year-old who died. His last name is Velasquez, Velasquez. First is Javier, Javier. Middle is Edgardo, Edgardo, and he's from Brandon. The passenger of the Chrysler also died. He's 20. We're going to keep his name for a minute, basically to identify or let the relatives know. And then in the back seat of that car, we had a 17-year-old girl from Sioux Falls and a 16-year-old boy from Sioux Falls. They were both taken to the hospital with serious injuries. One of the other things, I guess, to note is, especially after reviewing the camera, there were other vehicles that witnessed this accident but then left before police arrived. So what we'd ask is if anybody happened to witness that accident, that they would call police just so we can get their information as well. But speed is definitely a factor with this one. I saw some pictures of the cars, and it was just total devastation. I mean, that's really the only way to describe that. So our accident reconstruction guys, the team, will put together exactly what happened. And one of the things they look for is minimum speed. So that's one of the things they'll look to determine to find out if that speed is accurate. But obviously it was a very high speed before the accident happened. And they don't have any indication if drugs or alcohol. That'll be part of the investigation as well. A lot of that is dependent on getting the blood and getting the toxicology screen to find out the amounts, if there are any.
So there was 4 people inside the Chrysler and it was T-boned by the Subaru?
Yep, the 4 people inside the Chrysler, and it was hit on the driver's side by the Subaru, and the 2 people were in the Subaru.
They got the green light. Go.
The Chrysler got the green light and entered the intersection, and then and so they were basically, I don't think they had even started to make the turn yet. They had just entered the intersection going straight, and then the Subaru ran the red light and ran right into the side of the driver's side.
Essentially a T-bone accident.
Yep.
Sam, can you walk us through what happens as far as charges from here?
Well, the driver of the Subaru, he's still in the hospital. So the main thing with this is, first of all, to figure out exactly what happened. And so once they finish the reconstruction on this crash, they'll be able to obviously have all the factors, whether drugs, alcohol, what the speed was. Like I said, it was captured on traffic cameras, so the lights that's already been determined. But once everything is complete, then they'll send that information over to the state's attorney's office. They will review it and ultimately decide, what charges would be appropriate.
Would the driver be charged incorrectly, not the passenger then in that?
No, the passenger wouldn't be charged with anything, but yeah, it'd be the driver because they're operating the
He
vehicle.
was the one that had life-threatening injuries.
The driver has life-threatening injuries, right? Of the Subaru, yep.
And his passenger just had, 9
They were non-life-threatening injuries. I guess I don't know exactly the extent of the injuries, but they were, I think, everybody involved, they were pretty substantial injuries.
And both the driver and the passenger of the Subaru were 23-year-old males.
Correct, yep. Both of them are 23, the Subaru driver and passenger.
The passenger of the Chrysler was a 20-year-old male, you said?
20-year-old male, yep. He's from Sioux Falls.
Did traffic cameras show that Subaru was speeding through other intersections beforehand at all?
That I don't know. I mean, the city has different traffic cameras around, and it's not every single intersection, so I'm not sure. I guess I don't know their direction, where they came from, or if it was picked up on any of their traffic cameras. But that's one of the things that the investigators will look at, is they'll dig through the different cameras around to find out if there were, traveling at high rates of speed at other points, or possibly where they were going or coming from.
That's what I was curious, because if they're going that fast, they're obviously speeding through possibly other intersections. too,
Right,
so.
yep.
Was alcohol or any drug?
There wasn't any drugs or alcohol found that I'm aware of, but that's one of the things that also when they go through these serious accidents, they go through the cars, and there'll be a search warrant that gets served, and so they'll do a more extensive, basically digging through everything. So there's a chance they may find something. Sometimes that comes up. Obviously, the main focus of that is to look at the car itself, get details from it to make sure everything. I mean, from whether it was operating properly to getting the boxes inside the car that record the crash data. There's a lot of in-depth processing of those cars that'll happen. And one of the things, if they find anything, then obviously that would be noted as well. But like I said, early on at this point, there's no indication of drugs or alcohol, but that's all part of the investigation, so that may come out later if anything was found.
This happened at 11:40 that night.
11:40 p.m., yep, on Saturday night.
And so kind of right now, you guys are kind of doing a reconstruction of it. But you said there's other cars at that scene too, that kind of, where do
Yeah.
people report if they want to?
Well, the best thing they can do is just call the police department. Like I said, we're looking for witnesses, and so we're just looking to find out what they saw, and who knows, there may be something that they saw that the traffic cameras didn't pick up, or maybe some other witness didn't notice. So we just like them to call the police department, 367-7212, and then ask to talk to a traffic investigator, and they can give the information from there. And the accident reconstruction, it's not a fast process. As you can imagine, there's a lot of details to process with this, and there's a lot of physics that's involved as well. So it may be a few weeks before they're finished with that, and then on top of that, they have to wait for the toxicology, which could take 4 to 6 weeks for those to come back. Everybody good on that? Okay, we'll move on. The robbery is probably the next big thing. This happened Saturday morning. This is about 11 a.m. This was at the Wells Fargo on North Cliff Avenue. Cliff and Rice Street is where that was. We had a guy that walked in. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt, and he gave a note to the teller basically indicating that he wanted cash. He did not display any weapons, but the way he was holding his hands in the front pocket of the sweatshirt, the clerk thought that he may have a weapon in there. So he was given the cash. He walked away. Obviously, they had a good description of him and surveillance cameras in there. So we had one officer that was taking the report, getting the information. We had other officers that were checking the area. We had another officer that found what turned out to be our suspect walking on Weber Avenue near Falls Park. Initially, when the officer stopped him and to detain him, the guy reached in his pocket and grabbed a whole wad of cash and threw it into the air. Once they pieced everything together, found out that this was the guy that had just robbed the bank, and he did not have any weapons with him. So he was arrested for the robbery. I think it was second-degree robbery. Let me double check. First-degree robbery. Was just the one charge. All of the cash was recovered. And and his last name is Hanten, Hanten. First is Philip, Phillip. Middle is Christopher, Christopher, and he's 40 from Johnson, Iowa.
What's the difference between first and second charge robbery? Or
First and second, yeah. First degree is... Second degree would be no weapon. The first degree is the use of a dangerous weapon or simulating a dangerous weapon.
And so since he kind of, the way he was acting.
The way he was acting, yeah, and all of that really falls on the victim. And so she thought that the guy had a weapon, and so that's why we had the charge.
Around what time was he picked up? You said on Weber Avenue?
Yeah, it was right after that. I don't know if I have a
Some minutes later?
time, but yeah, it was just a couple of minutes later, probably about the time it would take him to walk from Wells Fargo or Falls
He
Park.
went to the bank on foot.
On foot, yep, he was walking.
Yeah. It's just that one charge?
Correct, just the one charge of first-degree robbery. And, yeah, I don't have a time on this when he was found.
Yeah, because you said officers were still at the bank at that time.
Yeah, they were still taking the report, and obviously, once they had the clothing description, and that was the big thing that matched, and so that's why the officer detained him, and then they reviewed the surveillance from inside the bank and found out that it was an exact match. The sex offenses, one of those we made an arrest on. This was just early this morning. This was a little after 2 a.m. It was a house in the 700 block of North Prairie Avenue. We had somebody inside the house. There was, well, let me back up. So there's a 15-year-old girl that lives there, and she's got a boyfriend that's 18, and Mom was under the impression that there was some type of protection order or no contact order to keep him away from the house, and he did not have permission to be at the house. There was another relative that found the two of them in bed together, and once they sorted everything out, turns out there's not been any paperwork for a protection order or no contact violation, but he was arrested for 2 counts: sexual contact with a child under 16, and then sexual exploitation of a minor. Do you want his name?
Yeah.
Last is Myers, Meyers. First is Gibson, Gibson. Middle is Che, Chae. Sorry, Chea. Chea, and he's a junior. He is 18 from Sioux Falls.
Where's that second charge coming?
Yeah, so the sexual exploitation of a minor is if they permit a minor to engage in activity or simulation of an activity that, in this case, involves nudity. There's 3 different subsections to that, but.
Is this the same guy from last week that went into the house and took her on that pursuit?
I don't think so.
Okay, so it's different, right?
Yeah. I think that was a different person. That's kind of it for the big stuff. The aggravated assaults, we had a couple of people that were, well, one of them was threatened with a knife. Another one, somebody drove a car at a person in a parking lot but didn't hit them. And the last was somebody was punched and kicked at a bar fight. No arrests on any of those. Burglary was a house that was entered. Disorderlies are mostly trespassings. The embezzlement was a car that was loaned out. Nothing real big with the family disputes or offenses. Frauds, we had ID thefts and checks. Larcenies and narcotics, I didn't make it to those this morning, didn't hear of anything big. The other sex offenses are just reports, no arrests on those. The simple assaults, there's the only thing out of those, there's one that was, guy was charged with kidnapping, but that was it was basically a domestic type dispute. It was a couple had an argument. They were inside a vehicle. He ended up hitting her and then was threatening her, basically just to beat her up, but didn't use any weapons. And then they started driving, and at one point she opened the door to try to get out, and he wouldn't let her get out. We had an officer that found that car and then stopped it, and once they sorted everything out, he was arrested for the domestic charges and had a kidnapping along with DWI. So no serious injuries to her, but it's not often we see a lot of kidnapping charges.
Get his name when you're ready.
Yeah. So this happened about 10:20 p.m. on Sunday night. They stopped on Madison Street near Ebenezer was where the traffic stop was made. And his last name is Dysart, D-Y-S-A-R-T. First is Jamie, J-A-Y-M-E. Middle is Ryan, R-Y-A-N. And he's 44 and a transient from Sioux Falls.
You guys get a lot of those cases where kind of domestic like that kind of becomes a little more serious?
With like a kidnapping type of charge?
Yeah, or just domestic cases like that.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, there's, domestics are really kind of, I guess they're unpredictable of kind of where they're going to end up, where they're going to go. I mean, we have domestic abuse is one of the things that affects really everybody across the city. It's not concentrated in one area. It's not limited to, any ethnicity or race or even like socioeconomic. I mean, it really does affect everybody. We've seen domestics, I mean, they range from people being threatened to people being minor injuries, serious injuries. We've had people that have been strangled to the point where they've blacked out and thought they were going to die. We have other stuff like this where people will refuse to let the other person, the victim, leave. Sometimes that's a vehicle, sometimes that's an apartment. And we've had them where they've kept them inside a home or apartment for a number of days. Sometimes it's a relatively short amount of time. Sometimes it's for an extended amount of time. But I mean, when it comes to domestics, there's really no end to the possibilities of the, I guess, the abuse that takes place. So thankfully, we don't see a lot of kidnappings, especially related to this, but they do come up from time to time.
Where somebody, a person can call if they're in that kind of situation, a domestic abuse situation.
Who should they call?
Yeah.
Call 911, call police. And that's a tough one too, because a lot of the abuse, there's a cycle that happens with that. And so people aren't always comfortable after that abuse. There's usually a kind of a honeymoon period where the abuser is really nice and kind and apologizes, but it's a cycle that happens over and over again. And so it sometimes takes victims a while before they're able to get enough courage to be able to call and report it, because they know that abuse could happen. And that's one of the things that happens with the threats as well, is if you call police, it's going to get worse. And so, we want people to be safe. There's a lot of different resources that are available in Sioux Falls. And so if they're not comfortable immediately calling police, they can go to one of those other agencies and work with them, and they can contact us as well. So we just want to make sure that people, if they're being abused, can get out and get to a safe place. We can worry about the reports later, but the safety is the primary focus there. Nothing big from the other simple assaults. Vandalisms, they didn't get to those either, and nothing big with the weapons violation. One of them, somebody heard some gunshots, didn't have any reports of damage. Another one was a guy that was intoxicated and had a gun with him. That was a DWI arrest, no threats or anything like that. And the last one, that was somebody that was found in possession of a stolen shotgun. And that's what I have today, unless you guys have any other questions.
Catalytic converter stolen over the last.
I didn't get to the larcenies, so I don't know if there were any. I didn't hear of any, but never know. Okay, thanks.